The father caught his son's eye at last and gave him a mild, responsible smile. "I'm getting on very well," he said. "Have you drunk your tea?" asked the son. "Yes, and enjoyed it. Shall I give you some more?" The old man considered placidly. "Well, I guess I will wait and see." He had, in speaking, the American tone. "Are you cold?" his son inquired. The father slowly rubbed his legs. "Well, I don't know. I can't tell till I feel." "Perhaps someone might feel for you," said the younger man, laughing. "Oh, I hope someone will always feel for me. Don't you feel for me, Lord Warburton?" "Oh, yes, immensely," said the gentleman, addressed as Lord Warburton promptly. "I'm bound to say you look wonderfully comfortable." "Well, I suppose I am, in most respects." And the old man looked down at his green shawl and smoothed it over his knees. "The fact is, I've been comfortable so many years that I suppose I've got so used to it I don't know it." "Yes, that's the bore of comfort," said Lord Warburton. "We only know when we are uncomfortable." "It strikes me that we're rather particular," said his companion. "Oh, yes, there's no doubt we're particular," Lord Warburton murmured. And then the three men remained silent a while, the two younger ones standing looking down at the other, who presently asked for more tea. "I should think you would be very unhappy with that shawl," said Lord Warburton, while his companion filled the old man's cup again. "Oh, no, he must have the shawl," cried the gentleman in the velvet coat. "Don't put such ideas as that into his head." "It belongs to my wife," said the old man simply. "Oh, if it's for sentimental reasons," and Lord Warburton made a gesture of apology. "I suppose I must give it to her when she comes," the old man went on. "You will please to do nothing of the kind. You will keep it to cover your poor old legs." "Well, you mustn't abuse my legs," said the old man. "I guess they're as good as yours." "Oh, you're perfectly free to abuse mine," his son replied, giving him his tea. "Well, we're two lame ducks. I don't think there's much difference." "I am much obliged to you for calling me a duck." "How's your tea?" "Well, it's rather hot. That's intended to be a merit." "Ah, there's a great deal of merit," murmured the old man kindly. "He's a very good nurse, Lord Warburton." "Isn't he a bit clumsy?" asked his lordship. "Oh, no, he's not clumsy, considering that he's an invalid himself. He's a very good nurse for a sick nurse. I call him my sick nurse because he's sick himself." "Oh, come, Daddy," the ugly young man exclaimed. "Well, you are. I wish you weren't, but I suppose you can't help it." "I might try. That's an idea," said the young man. "Were you ever sick, Lord Warburton?" his father asked. Lord Warburton considered a moment. "Yes, sir, once in the Persian Gulf." "He's making light of you, Daddy," said the other young man. "That's a sort of joke." "Well, there seem to be so many sorts now," Daddy replied serenely. You don't look as if you'd been sick anyway, Lord Warburton." "He's sick of life. He was just telling me so, going on fearfully about it," said Lord Warburton's friend. "Is that true, sir?" asked the old man gravely. "If it is, your son gave me no consolation. He's a wretched fellow to talk to, a regular cynic. He doesn't seem to believe anything." "That's another sort of joke," said the person accused of cynicism. It's because his health is so poor," his father explained to Lord Warburton. "It affects his mind and colours his way of looking at things. He seems to feel as if he'd never had a chance, but it's almost entirely theoretical, you know. It doesn't seem to affect his spirits. I've hardly ever seen him when he wasn't cheerful, about as he is at present. He often cheers me up." The young man, so described, looked at Lord Warburton and laughed. "It's a glowing eulogy of an accusation of levity." "Is it a glowing eulogy or an accusation of levity? Should you like me to carry out my theories, Daddy?" "By Jove, we should see some queer things," cried Lord Warburton. "I hope you haven't taken up that sort of tone," said the old man. "Warburton's tone is worse than mine. He pretends to be bored. I'm not in the least bored. I find life only too interesting." "Ah, too interesting. You shouldn't allow it to be that, you know." "I'm never bored when I come here," said Lord Warburton. "One gets such uncommonly good talk." "Is that another sort of joke?" asked the old man. "You have no excuse for being bored anywhere. When I was your age, I'd never heard of such a thing." "You must have developed very late." "No, I developed very quick. That was just the reason. When I was 20 years old, I was very highly developed indeed. I was working tooth and nail. You wouldn't be bored if you'd something to do. But all you young men are too idle. You think too much of your pleasure. You're too fastidious and too indolent, and certainly too rich. Oh, I say, cried Lord Warburton, you're hardly the person to accuse a fellow creature of being too rich. Do you mean because I'm a banker? Asked the old man. Because of that, if you like, and because you're so ridiculously wealthy. He isn't very rich, said the other young man, indicating his father. He's given away an immense deal of money. Well, I suppose it was his own, said Lord Warburton, and in that case could there be better proof of wealth? Let not a public benefactor talk of one's being too fond of pleasure. Daddy is very fond of pleasure, of other people's. The old man shook his head. I don't pretend to have contributed anything to the amusement of my contemporaries. My dear father, you're too modest. That's a kind of joke, sir, said Lord Warburton. You young men have too many jokes. When there are no jokes, you have nothing left. Fortunately, there are always more jokes, the ugly young man remarked. I don't believe it. I believe things are getting more serious. You young men will find that out. The increasing seriousness of things, that is the great opportunity for jokes. There will have to be grim jokes, said the old man. I'm convinced there will be great changes, and not all for the better. I quite agree with you, sir, Lord Warburton declared. I'm very sure there will be great changes, and that all sorts of queer things will happen, and that's why I find it so much difficulty in applying your advice. You know, you told me the other day that I ought to take hold of something. One hesitates to take hold of anything that may the next moment be knocked sky high. You ought to take hold of a pretty woman, said his companion. He's trying hard to fall in love, he added, by way of explanation to his father. The pretty women themselves may be sent flying, Lord Warburton exclaimed. No, they will be firm, the old man rejoined. They will not be affected by the social and political changes that I just referred to. You mean they won't be abolished? Very well, then. I will lay hands on one as soon as possible and tie her round my neck as a life preserver. The ladies will save us, said the old man. That is, the best of them will. For I make a difference between them. Make up to a good one and marry her, and your life will become much more interesting. A momentary silence marked, perhaps, on the part of his auditors, a sense of the magnanimity of this speech, for it was a secret, neither for his son nor for his visitor, that his own experiment in matrimony had not been a happy one. As he said, however, he made a difference, and these words may have been intended as a confession of personal error, though of course it was not in place for either of his companions to remark that apparently the lady of his choice had not been one of the best. If I marry an interesting woman, I shall be interested. Is that what you say? Lord Warburton asked. I'm not at all keen about marrying. Your son misinterpreted me. But there is no knowing what an interesting woman might do with me. I should like to see your idea of an interesting woman, said his friend. My dear fellow, you can't see ideas, especially such ethereal ones as mine. If I could see it myself, that would be a great step in advance. Well, you may fall in love with whomsoever you please, but you must not fall in love with my niece, said the old man. His son broke into a laugh. He will think you mean that as a provocation. My dear father, you've lived with the English for 30 years, and you've picked up a good many of the things they say, but you've never learned the things they don't say. I say what I please, the old man declared, with all his serenity. I haven't the honour of knowing your niece, Lord Warburton said. I think it is the first time I've heard of her. She is a niece of my wife's. Mrs. Touchett brings her to England. Then young Mr. Touchett explained. My mother, you know, has been spending the winter in America, and we're expecting her back. She writes that she has discovered a niece, and that she has invited her to come with her. I see, very kind of her, said Lord Warburton. Is the young lady interesting? We hardly know more about her than you do. My mother has not gone into details. She chiefly communicates with us by means of telegrams, and her telegrams are rather inscrutable. They say women don't know how to write them, but my mother has thoroughly mastered the art of condensation. Tired America, hot weather awful. Return England with niece. First steamer, decent cabin. That's the sort of message we get from her. That was the last that came. But there'd been another before, which I think contained the first mention of the niece. Changed hotel, very bad, impudent clerk, address here. Taken sister's girl, died last year, go to Europe, 2 sisters, quite independent. Over that, my father and I have scarcely stopped puzzling. It seems to admit of so many different interpretations. There's one thing very clear in it, said the old man. She's given the hotel clerk a dressing. I'm not even sure of that, since he's driven her from the field. We thought at first that the sister mentioned might be the sister of the clerk, but the subsequent mention of a niece seems to prove that the allusion is to one of my aunts. And then there was a question as to whose the 2 other sisters were. They're probably 2 of my late aunt's daughters, but who's quite independent, and in what sense is the term used? That point is not yet settled. Does the expression apply more particularly to the young lady my mother has adopted, or does it characterise her sisters equally? And is it used in a moral or in a financial sense? Does it mean that they have been left well off, or that they wish to be under no obligations? Or does it simply mean that they're fond of their own way? Whatever else it means, it's pretty sure to mean that, Mr. Touchett remarked. You will see for yourself, said Lord Warburton. When does Mrs. Touchett arrive? We're quite in the dark. As soon as she can find a decent cabin. She may be waiting for it yet, but on the other hand, she may already have disembarked in England. In that case, she would probably have telegraphed to you. She never telegraphs when you would expect it. Only when you don't, said the old man. She likes to drop on me suddenly. She thinks she'll find me doing something wrong. She's never done so yet, but she's not discouraged. It's her independence, her son explained more favourably. Whatever that of those young ladies may be, her own is a match for it. She likes to do everything for herself and has no belief in anyone's power to help her. She thinks me of no more use than a postage stamp without gum, and she would never forgive me if I should presume to go to Liverpool to meet her. Will you at least let me know when your cousin arrives? Lord Warburton asked. Only on the condition I've mentioned, that you don't fall in love with her, Mr. Touchett declared. That strikes me as hard. Don't you think me good enough? I think you too good, because I shouldn't like her to marry you. She hasn't come here to look for a husband, I hope. So many young ladies are doing that, as if there were no good ones at home. And then she's probably engaged. American girls are usually engaged, I believe. Moreover, I'm not sure, after all, that you would be a good husband. Very likely she's engaged. I've known a good many American girls, and they always were, but I could never see that it made any difference, upon my word. As for my being a good husband, I'm not sure of that either. One can but try. Try as much as you please, but don't try on my niece, said the old man, whose opposition to the idea was broadly humorous. Ah, well, said Lord Warburton with a humour broader still, perhaps, after all, she's not worth trying on.